Imagine risking your life just to find a single bag of flour. For millions of people living in Gaza, this is not a distant nightmare, but a daily, grinding reality. Picture this. A parent, already exhausted from months of hunger and fear, walks with their child through bombed-out streets, past collapsed buildings and the smell of burning plastic, desperate for a chance at survival. This week, at least 31 Palestinians were shot and killed as they tried to reach an aid distribution site, while at least 28 more, including, heartbreakingly, 4 children perished under Israeli airstrikes. The world is watching these horrors unfold on their screens. But ask yourself, is anyone truly listening? Or have these images become just another headline among many, lost in the endless scroll of tragedy? To truly grasp how Gaza reached this unimaginable breaking point, we need to rewind history. After the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to leave their homes, their villages, their entire way of life. Gaza, a narrow coastal strip wedged along the Mediterranean, became a crowded refuge, its population swelling with those fleeing violence and dispossession. Over the decades, the situation in Gaza grew steadily more dire. In the late 1960s, Israeli occupation began, followed by repeated wars, internal divisions, and a tightening blockade that has lasted for more than 15 years. This blockade, likened by many observers to a siege, has cut Gaza off from the world. Imports and exports are tightly controlled. Travel is nearly impossible for most. Jobs are scarce. And even the basics, electricity, clean water, medical supplies, are in perpetual crisis. Today, Gaza is home to more than 2 million people, the vast majority of them descendants of those refugees from 1948. Most families are dependent on outside aid just to survive. The collapse of basic services, hospitals, schools, electricity, water treatment, is not new. But never before has the situation been so catastrophic. In the past, periods of violence and deprivation were punctuated by brief moments of relative calm. Now, those moments are vanishingly rare. Each day brings more death, more loss, and a deepening sense of hopelessness. In the past year, Gaza's crisis has escalated to unprecedented levels. Following a brief ceasefire that ended in March of 2025, Israel imposed even tighter restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid. Not only have food, fuel, and medical supplies become scarcer than ever, but even those trying to access the little aid that does arrive face mortal danger. According to the United Nations Human Rights Office, in just 1 month, more than 600 Palestinians have been killed near aid distribution points. 509 of those deaths are linked to sites operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an American-backed organization that claims to be delivering emergency relief. Chris Newton, a leading analyst with the Crisis Group, warns, the new aid system looks designed to fail. The desperation on the ground is raw and overwhelming. Red Cross staff report that their field hospital has seen its largest influx of dead and wounded in over a year, the majority suffering from gunshot wounds. Hospitals, already on the verge of collapse, are now overwhelmed by trauma cases. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers describe scenes of chaos. Children carried in by frantic parents, elderly men and women bleeding on makeshift stretchers, and a constant stream of new casualties. Dr. Abdulhab Abu al-Amrain, a senior physician at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, underscores the gravity of the situation. Distribution sites don't allow for equitable aid access. Most go home hungry or worse. He recounts heartbreaking stories of patients who survive bombs only to be killed while searching for food. Amidst this chaos, international diplomacy appears paralyzed. Despite repeated statements by President Donald Trump claiming progress towards a ceasefire, the reality on the ground remains unchanged. Israeli airstrikes continue to pound residential neighborhoods. Ceasefire talks, even after high-profile meetings between world leaders, have yielded little more than empty promises. Just this week, the United Nations managed to deliver the first shipment of fuel into Gaza in over 130 days. That shipment amounted to less than 1% of Gaza's daily needs, a mere drop in the ocean. Hospitals, which rely on fuel for generators, remain shrouded in darkness. According to United Nations officials, more than 100 premature babies are now at imminent risk of death as incubators shut down, unable to function without electricity. Doctors have been forced to choose which infants receive the last remaining drops of fuel, a choice no one should ever have to make. Families are caught in a web of impossible choices. 17-year-old Nasir, a bright and ambitious teenager, told his mother, "Even if I die, I'll go and get flour." He never returned. This is not a unique story. It is a refrain echoed in countless households across Gaza. Parents send their children to fetch food, knowing they may never see them again. For these families, humanitarian aid has become a matter of life and death. Sometimes, tragically, more of the latter. Is this what aid looks like in the year 2025? Are these the images that should define our era? But the situation grows even more disturbing when we examine the conditions at the aid distribution sites themselves. Eyewitnesses have described Israeli tanks opening fire on crowds of civilians, while the Israeli military claims it only fires warning shots to disperse people they say are behaving suspiciously. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, for its part, denies any violence at its distribution sites. However, even their own contractors admit to the use of live ammunition and stun grenades as desperate Gazans scramble for food. Dr. Ayesha Khan, an American emergency medicine physician who has volunteered in conflict zones around the world, puts it bluntly. This GHF was created in order to weaponize humanitarian aid. Her words echo a growing sense of distrust and outrage among both aid workers and ordinary civilians. So, who is telling the truth? Is the violence at distribution sites the result of military error, criminal activity, or a calculated policy to restrict access to aid? With journalists and independent observers largely barred from the ground, the fog of war grows thicker by the day. Social media is flooded with conflicting narratives, some showing videos of chaos and gunfire, others depicting calm and orderly lines. This confusion is not accidental. It serves those who benefit from instability and impunity. The tragedy unfolding at Gaza's aid sites is not just today's crisis. It is a grim signpost for what lies ahead. International organizations warn that if this pattern continues, Gaza faces the imminent threat of irreversible, man-made famine. The United Nations recently reported over 600 deaths near aid points in a single month, with more than 500 directly linked to the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. Despite this, the violence and chaos show no signs of slowing down. Food security experts now warn that Gaza is on the brink of famine, a catastrophe that could claim tens of thousands more lives in the coming months. Doctors inside Gaza, like Dr. Abdulhab Abu Alamrain, continue to sound the alarm. Distribution sites don't allow for equitable aid access. Most go home hungry or worse. The first fuel shipment in over 130 days recently entered Gaza, but it was only a fraction of what is needed. Hospitals, schools, and water treatment plants still operate in darkness, or not at all. More than 100 premature babies are now at risk because there is no fuel for incubators. The price of survival for ordinary Gazans grows steeper every day, and the psychological toll is mounting. Children show signs of trauma, anxiety, and developmental delays. The scars of war are not only physical, they run deep into the minds and futures of Gaza's youngest generation. The consequences of this humanitarian disaster are not limited to hunger and disease. Experts warn of an impending mental health crisis. Studies from previous famines, such as the Great Chinese Famine of the late 1950s and early 1960s, show that children exposed to prolonged hunger are more likely to face lifelong cognitive decline, kidney disease, and psychological trauma. In Gaza, where over half the population is under 18, the risk of creating a lost generation is alarmingly real. Dr. Ayesha Khan warns, if this system is not changed, we will see a generation lost, their bodies and minds stunted by famine and war. What about the future? One scenario is grimly straightforward. Continued restrictions and violence at aid points could lead to the total collapse of humanitarian services. Experts fear not only a surge in deaths from hunger, but outbreaks of disease, cholera, typhoid, and other preventable illnesses, as water and sanitation systems fail. Mothers will watch their children waste away from malnutrition, their immune systems weakened, their futures stolen before they begin. Schools, already shuttered or destroyed, offer little hope for education or safety. The trauma of constant fear and loss may shape the psyche of Gaza's children for decades to come, echoing the devastating consequences witnessed in other protracted conflicts. Yet amidst these bleak prospects, there remains a sliver of hope. Negotiations for a ceasefire, however fragile, are still possible. Analysts point out that real progress depends not on empty promises, but on sustained pressure from powerful countries. As one Al Jazeera analyst put it, if President Trump wants a Gaza ceasefire, he must pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu. If a true ceasefire leads to the opening of secure and reliable aid corridors, humanitarian groups could finally reach those most in need and stem the tide of suffering. But this requires more than lip service. It demands real action, accountability, and a willingness to address the root causes of the conflict. What lessons can the world draw from Gaza's ongoing catastrophe? First, information is power. In an environment where propaganda, rumors, and misinformation proliferate, it is crucial for every viewer to remain critical and vigilant. Examine multiple sources. Demand transparency, not only from governments, but also from the organizations tasked with delivering aid. When names like Gaza Humanitarian Foundation appear, ask tough questions. Who is truly in control? Who is benefiting? Who is being left behind? Second, humanitarian crises are not distant, abstract events. They are urgent signals of global systems under strain. The failures in Gaza today could become failures elsewhere tomorrow, whether in Yemen, Sudan, or any other region caught in the crossfire of politics and war. Supporting fair, independent aid distribution and demanding accountability matters, no matter where you live. Your voice expressed through voting, donations, or raising awareness on social media can make a real difference. Public pressure has, in the past, forced governments and organizations to act. History shows that complacency breeds impunity. Silence is never neutral. And finally, empathy is not a sign of weakness. As United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk so powerfully put it, Israel's warfare in Gaza is inflicting horrifying, unconscionable suffering on civilians. By learning the stories of ordinary Gazans, refusing to let statistics numb us to the human cost, we keep their struggle alive in the global conscience. Every number represents a person, a child, a parent, a dream cut short. So, can innocent Gazans survive when even humanitarian aid sites become deadly traps? The answer is both grim and urgent. Survival is possible, but only if the international community demands genuine protection for civilians and ensures that those with power act, not just speak. In this moment, trust is in painfully short supply. But every small act, every question, every donation, every share ripples outwards, challenging the systems that perpetuate suffering. Here's a secret rarely mentioned in headlines. The breakdown of law and order inside Gaza has allowed not just outside actors, but also local criminal groups to seize parts of the aid supply for profit. In the chaos, looting and black market sales flourish. Some of the food and medicine meant for the most vulnerable ends up in the hands of those willing to pay exorbitant prices. Without urgent reforms to the distribution system, this suffering will not only continue, it will deepen, hidden behind a fog of bureaucracy and deliberate misinformation. Aid, in some cases, becomes another weapon in the arsenal of war. The roots of Gaza's humanitarian crisis are tangled in decades of displacement, occupation, and failed diplomacy. The blockade imposed since 2007 has devastated the local economy, crushed small businesses, and left well over 70% of young people unemployed. Even before the most recent escalation, the United Nations classified Gaza as nearly unlivable. Now, with most infrastructure destroyed and families facing starvation, the situation is unprecedented in its severity. Comparisons are now drawn to historical tragedies: the siege of Leningrad, the famine of Biafra, the Great Chinese Famine. Each of those crises left scars on entire generations: physical, emotional, and political. The international community faces a stark choice: intervene meaningfully or become complicit by inaction. The lessons of history are clear. In Ethiopia's famine of the 1980s, global outrage helped mobilize a massive relief effort and eventually pressured warring parties towards negotiation. In contrast, the world's slow response to Rwanda's genocide led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, a stain on our collective conscience. In Gaza, the stakes are just as high. Action, real, sustained, and coordinated, could save tens of thousands of lives and offer a glimmer of hope in a sea of despair. What can you do as an individual? First, stay informed. Seek out reputable news sources, cross-check facts, and share accurate information with your networks. Second, support organizations with a proven track record of effective, transparent aid delivery. Research where your donations are going and who is overseeing their use. Third, use your voice. Contact elected officials, sign petitions, join peaceful demonstrations, and demand that policymakers prioritize humanitarian access and civilian protection. Fourth, challenge narratives that dehumanize or oversimplify the conflict. Remember that behind every statistic is a story. It's also vital to remain aware of the broader implications. The collapse of humanitarian systems in Gaza could serve as a warning for the future of international aid. If aid can be weaponized here, it can be weaponized anywhere. If the world accepts the deaths of children at aid sites as inevitable, what precedent does that set for future crises? The erosion of international norms, such as the protection of civilians and the neutrality of humanitarian organizations, threatens not just Gaza, but the very fabric of global cooperation. In closing, the crisis in Gaza is not just a distant tragedy. It is a test of our shared humanity. The images of grieving parents, starving children, and destroyed hospitals should not be met with resignation. They should be a call to action. As history has shown, change is possible, but only if we refuse to look away. Every voice matters. Every act of solidarity, no matter how small, contributes to the possibility of a better future. If this story has moved you, do not turn away. Subscribe to our channel for ongoing updates and in-depth analysis of how global economics and technology shape crises like these. Share this video to keep the world's eyes on Gaza. And above all, stay informed, stay compassionate, and never underestimate the power of collective action. The fate of millions hangs in the balance. Let us not be silent witnesses to suffering,